So I am going to do some maintenance on this van, and while I do it, I thought it would be fun to have sort of a candid conversation with all of you. So I've got a new belt, I've got a new alternator. This came in, I had to order this. The way I'm going to do this is, well, I haven't thought it through yet. But basically, I've got a couple of cameras here. I'm going to put this camera, this little Sony camera, somewhere where you can actually see what I'm doing. I do a lot of bicycle related videos. I've made videos talking about bike parts and doing bike rides and I don't know, just a variety of bicycle content. Once in a while this van shows up in my videos, but it's not really the centerpiece of this channel at all. But some of you liked the videos that I've made where I show my van. So anyway, I just think this would be kind of a fun format today. So I'm going to put this camera someplace where we can all see the action with the action camera. Let's see. One of the cool things about these little gimbals, or not gimbals, tripods, is you can kind of put a camera wherever you want. So what I've got here, I'm taking off. This is a mass-loaded vinyl. If any of you are interested, this is a Volkswagen van, and they're very noisy. These engines make a lot of noise. So I found that adding a little weighted mass over the engine bay, especially, has helped to quiet it down on the inside. Okay. Alright, I should get some lighting on here so you guys can see what I'm actually doing. Alright, we've got some light here. Okay, are you guys able to see what the engine looks like? I'm going to tilt this a little better because I think it's actually over here. Okay, so here's the alternator here. Here's the new one. Here's the one that needs to come out. We've got our belt, and I've got a few other things. Get some tools over here, ready to go. There's a fan, a pulley, and another fan. There's two fans on the alternator. And the reason is, this is an air-cooled, this is a 1981 air-cooled van again. It's a 2-liter engine. I rebuilt it a few years ago. Now, I don't know, maybe it was 3 or 4 years ago now. And this fan, this auxiliary fan, what this does is, this actually blows the air through the heat exchangers. And that air is then used for the defroster, and it's used for the heater, the cabin heat. An air-cooled engine does not have water, obviously it doesn't have a water cooling system. So the way a heater and defroster system works in a water-cooled car is the water that is being used to cool the engine is used to heat the heater in your car. So the way it works is it takes that hot water, it runs it through a heat exchanger that heats up. It's like another radiator, but it does the opposite. The radiator heats up, and then the air is blown with an electric motor, is blown over that radiator, and that's the heat that you use to defrost your windows and to heat up the cabin in your car. When you don't have water, you can't create, it's much harder to create a heat exchanger. So the way the heat exchangers work in an air-cooled engine is there's a heat exchanger that wraps around the exhaust system, and that heat is then drawn off with this fan, and the fan is turned by the belt. Runs a rubber belt like this, like a bike chain, but it's a belt, and it spins this fan, and there's some ducting that runs it down. It runs down over the exhaust pipes, and then all the way, the ducting runs all the way to the front of the vehicle, and that is how you heat up your vehicle. That's how you defrost your windows. So this fan is very important. This other fan that's on here that you see on the alternator, this little fan, this is just to cool the alternator when it gets warm from generating electricity. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this setup on the alternator first, then I'll pull the old one out. So I'm kind of fortunate in that I have lots of spare parts from working on this engine for many years. So I got this van about, let's see, 2011. I bought this van. It was sort of an abandoned vehicle. The owner who had it before me bought it from somebody down in Southern California, and it was sitting in a field or a driveway or something along those lines. And it had sat for 10 years. It was on non-op. In California, we have a feature where if you don't drive your vehicle, you can put it on a non-operational status, and that way you don't have to pay for insurance, but you can't obviously drive it. So it was on a non-op status for over 10 years, and some fellow I think it was over in Sacramento area, bought the van, drug it home, and he was planning to refurbish it and take it out with his son. They were going to go do fishing trips in it, and that was his idea, was to build a little, like a little RV for fishing trips. So he bought this van and was starting to do that, get it refurbished. But I think he realized that because it had sat for so long, it had so much deferred maintenance that I just don't think he was interested in doing all of that work. So he immediately relisted it back onto Craigslist. So when I bought this van, he had never even transferred the title over to his name yet, because he had just had it for a few weeks. So he signed it directly over to me from the earlier owner, who signed it over to him. So anyway, that's how I got this van. I didn't pay very much for it. I towed it home, and it sat in my driveway for a while before I started really working on it. I tried to get it running with the engine that was in it, and I got it running for a little while, but I overheated it, and I dropped a valve. I dropped a valve, as they say. Once that happens, you have to rebuild the engine. So I went to the junkyard and I pulled an engine out at the junkyard where there was a used van, again, just like this one. It wasn't the camper model, but I pulled that engine out at the junkyard and then took it home and put that engine in, and that ran for a few years. But eventually, it started to show signs of problems also. These engines, these 2-liter engines, have notorious problems with the cylinder heads. They overheat, and what happens is the exhaust valves especially get really hot, and the seats are steel, and they're pressed into an aluminum cylinder head. So they're just like, it looks like a little washer basically, and they're pressed into the cylinder heads. And so aluminum and steel have different rates of expansion. There's an exact tolerance that has to be achieved so that when you press that steel into the aluminum, and when the aluminum and the steel expand at different rates, the valve doesn't get loose, the valve seat doesn't get loose and fall out. Rebuilding the engine cost me around $3,000. So I spent about $1,600 or $1,800, I think, on the cylinder heads. I had them custom made for me by a guy down in San Diego who did a terrific job. They're still working great. I did a lot of little customizations to the engine along the way, and so far it's running really good. I've had to replace the starter and the alternator. So, and that's about it. Everything else has been holding up really well. All right. So now what I want to do is I'm going to make sure I got this belt on here. That's important. You don't want to forget the belt, because then you get it all put together and without the belt on, and you realize fit this in here. Alright, well, let's talk about bicycles now that we're moving along here. Which reminds me, so I read this book a long time ago. That's what I wanted to talk about today, was this book I read. So many years ago, I bought a book or read a book called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. I know a lot of you have probably read that book yourself, or you've heard about it, because there's been a lot of other books that have kind of copied that idea, where it's Zen in the art of bicycle maintenance, or Zen in the art of, gardening. There's a lot of, plays on that theme. But the original one is Zen in the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. And it was written by a fellow named Robert Pirsig. Robert Pirsig. And what was really cool, what's really cool about that, I'm gonna set this down. What was really, really cool about that video, or that book, what was really cool about that book is that it's a story, but it's also a philosophy. And Robert, so the story is really just about a father and a son who take a road trip on a motorcycle with a friend of theirs, and they ride around the country, and they ride along a lot of the back roads. And there's a lot of parallels between doing that on a motorcycle and doing that on a bicycle. There's a lot of parallels. And Robert Pirsig, the author, rides with this friend of his who has a brand new, state-of-the-art BMW motorcycle, okay? And what Robert is riding, he's riding a motorcycle with his son. The kid's kind of sitting on the back. And he's riding this older 70s, I think it was a 70s model, Honda motorcycle, if I remember correctly. But it was a very simple one compared to his friend's modern, I don't know when the book was written. I forgot when the book was written. I think it was written in the 70s. But the motorcycle his friend was riding was state-of-the-art. And so throughout the story, there's a lot of comparisons between riding a new motorcycle or riding an older motorcycle with more simplified technology. And I really enjoyed reading that book because for all the years, I've always been really interested in like older cars, older bicycles, more traditional things that are just kind of timeless, kind of classic stuff. So on this channel, I made a video series about my custom bike, and I got a lot of comments from people who don't really understand why. There's a lot of questions on why. Why do you, the comment starts off with a why. Why do you want down tube shifters? Isn't that old, outdated technology? Why do you use 1 inch threaded headset? Why, so basically the question is it's why do you do this? And those kind of questions are really good, but they're hard to answer because no matter how you try to answer that question, it sounds like you're defending the position you're taking. And I'm not really trying to defend that that's the right path for everyone. I don't necessarily think it is. I think newer bikes and newer bike technology works really well for some people. And I wouldn't try to take it away or suggest that what I'm doing is something that everyone else should do too. I don't say that. I feel like I made this video. I make my videos because there's probably somebody else out there who likes to do that kind of thing the same way. Here I am not a professional cyclist. I don't have I'm not a sponsored cyclist, so I have to pay for and fix everything myself. And I enjoy that. I enjoy doing it myself, which is largely why I end up, I'm looking for a 13 millimeter wrench here. Yeah, I already pulled, oh, here it is. Which is probably why I do a lot of those things the way I do them, is because I want something simple. I want something I can look at and I can understand what's wrong with it. And that was really the theme of that book. Oh, that was one of the themes in the book of Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance was, why does Robert Pirsig want to ride a motorcycle where he has to adjust the air-fuel mixture when he's going up into the higher altitudes? And why does he want to have to adjust the points periodically to make sure that the spark timing is correct? Don't those things seem like a bad idea, especially if you're out motorcycle touring? And that's a good point. I mean, the other guy is riding this BMW, which is pretty much maintenance free for the most part, and the parts are higher tech, and they have to come from the. A lot of times it's hard to install those parts if they were to, have a problem. So he's coming. What am I trying to say about this? I'm trying to get this air box out of here. This is the intake air. It has a sensor on it that you have to unhook. It's been a while, so I don't know if I took this off last time, but I'm going to take it off this time because it'll make it a little easier for me to see what's going on in here. Dang it. What is going on? This is the air intake. I should check out. I'll take a look at this air filter too and see how clean it is. There we go. Now it's a little easier to see the alternator. Okay, so this is the alternator plug. I'm going to unplug this right here. There's also this alternator signal that tells us whether the alternator is charging or not. That's this plug. You probably can't see any of this. Anyway, you'll see it when I pull it out. Okay. And then there's the little bracket down here, which is mounted on there. And what I'm going to do is try to pull this out. This one's kind of... Yeah. Okay. So as I said, this is part of that ducting that is where the fan blows this air in. This goes to one of the heat exchangers, and this goes to the other one. There's two heat exchangers because this is a horizontally opposed engine. So the two pistons go this way, two pistons go this way. So there's an exhaust manifold on that side and an exhaust manifold on that side. And these ducts here push that air from the alternator down into those heat exchangers, and that air gets heated up by the exhaust system. During the journey as they ride across the US, and what's similar about this trip is that they choose to ride on a lot of the back roads, which is what a lot of cyclists do. We choose to ride the back roads. We want to check out these small towns and meet the people who live in these small towns. And so anyway, along the way, Robert has to do a lot of maintenance on his motorcycle because it's older, and it requires it. And his buddy has this brand new state-of-the-art motorcycle, and it supposedly doesn't need anything like that. It just needs less maintenance. And so his buddy keeps asking him, why don't you get an updated modern motorcycle? It's going to make your life better. It's going to make your life more, you can do this ride with less stress. You don't have to go out there every morning and adjust the points to make sure that the spark timing is right. You don't have to check the air-fuel ratio. You don't have to adjust the carburetor when you're climbing up into the higher altitudes. You don't have to deal with that. So his friend doesn't quite understand why he's doing it. And I feel like that is really the essence of a lot of questions that I get on YouTube about, why do you want to use down tube shifters and older kind of technology? And the basic answer is that it's very simple. It's very easy to understand. There are very few moving parts that you can't figure out how to fix if they were to break. Especially if you're out on a long ride, you're out in an area where you don't know the area very well. There's a good chance that you could have a mechanical problem, and having a bicycle that's really simple to understand can make your life a lot better when you do have a serious mechanical problem. To contrast that, though, somebody would say, well, but wouldn't a newer bike have less chance of breaking? So by having a bike that's older technology, it's going to break, whereas a new bike wouldn't. Well, I don't think that's true. I think the more complicated that the system is, the more complicated the mechanical or electrical system. And I say electrical now because a lot of bikes now are coming with electronic shifters. And these systems are more likely, the more complicated the system is, the greater possibility that something will go wrong. And that's just a fact of reality. You can have a very complicated system perform well, but you can also see. I got to take off to get this belt off. There's a timing. Got to take this timing marker off. Anyway, you guys can't see this, but what I'm doing down here is just to get this rubber belt off. You have to remove the timing marker to time the engine, which maybe I'll time the engine today. So anyway, I guess that's really the answer. The answer is when I'm out on a long ride, I want to be able to see what's broken and be able to quickly assess what's wrong with the bike, and then be able to come up with a solution to get me back on the road, to get me home, or to get me someplace where I need to make that tough, phone call, or maybe I need to rent, maybe I just need to find a bike shop nearby, so maybe I have to get a hotel room for the night or something. But, once you know what you're doing, once you know what the problem is, you can come up with a plan really quick. Whereas a complicated issue can make that a little more challenging. Now, bicycles in general, I realize, are even the most complicated bicycle is still way more simple than an automobile or something like that. So I'm not delusional. I realize how simple the bicycle is already. All right, so we're getting this alternator out, and it's a little finagling here, so I don't have to take off this bracket. Let's see if I can do it. I've done it before, I think. Oh, here it comes. This is like a game of Tetris. That tells you how old I am. Okay, so this belt, I knew I was going to do something wrong. See, I put the belt on the inside of this bolt on that one, which means, and I didn't put the bracket on anyway, so we got to take this back off anyway. So that's why I never get too far. Don't ever want to get too far down the line. So that means I got to take this one. I got to pull this bolt back off, this harder one, so I can fix where I put this bracket. So I don't know, maybe you guys can leave a comment down below. Do you think what I said about simplicity of a bicycle will help you out in the field, or is it really the fact that, or does it not really relate well to bicycles? Because bicycles are pretty, in general, they're pretty simple as it is. Maybe it's not even really relevant to say that. to say that you need a simple bike in order to get out of a sticky situation. All right, let's give it a try. See if we can fit it in here. This is always, you can never remember how to get it in. There we go. There we go. There we go. I think that goes in there. Let's see. I want to go. Down there. Got it. And we bring it up here so that they support this alternator up here. So we don't want to strip it. So you want to make sure you thread this in by hand before you go crazy with a wrench. This is the 13. Nope. 13. Yeah, no, I could. Actually, that's a 13. Let's use this. What I'm going to do is just get this, just snug it up. I'm not going to snug it up so we know it works, and then we'll back it off. Then what I'm going to do is get the other bolt for the bracket, for this lower bracket, onto the mount. So you get a little leverage here. You can tighten this belt. You don't want it too tight because it will wear out, but you don't want it too loose either. Tighten this back down. Okay, so we've got the alternator in. We've tightened down the belt. We've got this tight. We've got all the little bolts tight. We need to put the timing marker, that's this guy, put this back on. This is how you adjust the timing. And make sure we have all of our sockets. Always check to make sure. One of the things I learned working on stuff is make sure you have all the tools back before you close up anything, because you can easily forget and leave your tools down in here and you'll lose it. All right, let's put on this next, the plenum here. And so I think that covers it. I just have to put this air plenum back. But while I'm in here, I'm going to take a quick look at this air filter, see how it's holding up. Well, it was a little dirty, but not too bad. And we can, I think this is a square, so it should fit back in here really well. Ah, the simple life. This is the air flow meter. All right, let's put this back in and get this dialed back in here. Here we are. That locks down there. Then we're going to tighten up this so we don't get any outside air flowing through. That's in, that's plugged in. Okay, I think that's everything. I'm going to put all these tools away. All right, should we start it up and see if it works? Are we ready? Start this thing up. Check to see if it's working. Got everything here. Got all the spark plugs plugged in, air fuel meter here. That's how you adjust your air fuel ratios. Got our distributor. Everything looks good. This is a fuel injected air cooled engine, which is very interesting. It's probably not something you see very often. Anyway, okay, I'm going to start this up. Hopefully I didn't mess up anything. Let's go give it a try. Alright, so I'm going to conclude this video right here. I want to thank all of you for watching. Thank you all for subscribing. And we'll keep plugging away and we'll make some more videos very, very soon. Have a nice evening.